Hey, what's up guys? It's CovertCode here, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make a codes GUI on Roblox. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you can see these tabs. Go to View up here, click Explorer, Properties, Toolbox, and Output, okay? And I would also suggest that you click on Model and Insert Object. So we're basically going to have to design the GUI first. So click on Starter GUI right here, okay? And insert a Screen GUI by going to Insert Object and click on Screen GUI, and make sure you set this to false. So reset on spawn, set that to false, and name the GUI Codes UI. The next thing is insert a frame, okay, inside of your Codes GUI and set the size to 0.10.10. Just like this, okay? That basically helps it resize according to every single screen. So essentially it'll look the same on every device that the players play on. And I'm just going to resize this. Now this is obviously personal preference. I think this is a good size for a Codes GUI. I'm going to make this bluish, just like that. Set the border size pixel to 0. And I'm going to insert a UI corner inside of this, okay? And I'm going to set the offset to 0 and scale to 0.2, and that's essentially going to give us these nice round corners, but I believe these corners are too strong, so I'm going to set that to 2.1, and I think that's better. Then I'm going to insert a UI stroke inside of the frame here, and that's going to give us this little border, okay? And I'm going to make this 3, and I'm going to make the border white, okay, and it adds a bit of depth, okay? And I'm going to also insert a UI gradient, okay, and watch what this does, okay? So the UI corner, by the way, adds the rounded corners. The UI stroke adds this border here, okay? So I just set the thickness to 3. The larger the thickness, obviously, the more thick the border is. And the UI gradient, if you go to color and click on these 3 dots, okay, click on this arrow here, and essentially you're going to make the color transition from white to something else. So I want this to go from white to grayish, and see what it's doing to the color here, okay? So we want to transition roughly to that sort of color right there. See how it adds a bit of flair to the UI? Not necessary, but I like to add gradients to my UI because it makes them look that much better, okay? So I'm going to call this background, just like that. I am going to insert a text label, which is essentially text, okay? Set the size to 0.10.10, as always. Resize this, and this is going to be our title, okay? So I'm going to probably put it here, okay? Set the background transparency to 1, set the text scaled property to true, that's pretty important. And I'm going to set the text color to white, okay? Just like that, and change the font to whatever you guys like. I like Gotham Black. I think it looks good, and I'm going to set the text property to codes, okay, just like this. And I'm also going to give the text a border, so I'm going to go to text stroke transparency and set this to 0.6, and as you guys can see, it has a small border. So the next thing is the actual text box which players go to, type in their code, and essentially press enter to submit their code. So I'm going to click on the frame, okay, and I'm going to insert a text box, just like this. Again, always set the size to 0.1.0.1.0, okay. Resize this, so this is where players will actually click on to enter the text, okay. Set the border size pixel to 0, set background color to, I think gray would work with this, like something like that would work, and copy this UI corner and paste it inside of the text box, okay? Now you've got some nice rounded corners. Now click on the text box, scroll down in the properties tab, okay? And set the text scale to true, okay? And click on placeholder text and set this to enter code, okay? So that's essentially gonna be there. And when someone clicks on it, it'll disappear just like this, and they'll get the actual text. However, we want the text to be white, okay, just like this, and set the font to Gotham Black as well, so it matches our title font. Add some text stroke, just like the title, so 0.7, 0.6, 0.6 works, and insert a text size constraint within the text box, and what this will do is essentially limit the size of the text. So see how the text is massive right now? We want to limit that to around 35, And as you guys can see, on all devices, the maximum text size will be 35. And I'm going to clear the text right here, and it's just going to say enter code. I'm going to make this slightly lighter, just like this. And it's going to ask the user to enter the code whenever they see this. Okay, so I'm just going to drag this, make sure it's centered. If it's centered, this line will come up, just like this. And you've got a centered frame. Okay, now the final piece of the puzzle that we need, actually the final two pieces, you need one text label. So copy this, okay, right click, copy that text label. I'm going to call this title, okay, and I'm going to paste it inside of the background, and this is going to be description. So call that description, just like that, okay, and the text is going to be like, hey, follow me on Twitter and get some exclusive coins or codes for this game. So essentially, you're telling them where to go for codes. So in my case, follow @RealCalvinGray on Twitter for exclusive codes that can be redeemed, or something like that. So you've got this nice text. Lower this text box right here. Make sure this is centered just like that. And you've got this text here. I'm going to resize this to make it slightly smaller, just like that. And that looks okay to me, right? I think this should be slightly smaller, so I'm going to insert a text size constraint again within the description, and I'm going to limit this to around 40, maybe 35, and as you guys can see, the maximum size of the text is shrinking. Now, the final thing we need to do is add a button, okay? So we need to insert a text button within the background frame, okay? And this button will essentially be used for submitting the code. So whenever you enter a code, you click this and you attempt to redeem that code, okay? So I'm going to call this submit, set the border size pixel to 0, give it a nice, I don't know, greenish color or something like that. Something like that. Okay, set text scaled to true, set text color to white again. This is all style preference, guys. You can, make it look however you guys want. Set the text stroke transparency to 0.6 again. And yeah, that's your button right there. Center it just like this. Remember, the line comes up when you center it correctly. Insert a UI corner, okay, within that text button, and set offset to 0 yet again, and set scale to 0.1 or maybe 0.25, and you've got a nice circular button. And now we have all the items we need to make this work. The only thing I am going to do is make this look slightly better just for you guys. So I'm going to copy this background, duplicate it actually, insert it within itself, and clear up everything except these 3 items right here, okay? And you've got this simplistic frame. I'm going to essentially have a background frame for the title, okay? Just to add a bit of depth. Insert the title into the background, just like this. I should probably call this title frame or something, just so it's not called the same thing. Resize that to be around that size, and you've got a small title frame. I'm going to remove the UI gradient, okay? And we've got this sort of frame here. That might be a bit too big. There we go. Next thing is I'm going to be changing the color for this. I'm going to be going to background color 3, click on that, pick screen color, pick the color that it's currently behind or in front of. So the color of this frame here, okay? So just put your mouse there, click, and make it slightly darker. So it's not that contrasting, but it's still pretty good. Actually, I'm gonna make it lighter. I think something like this would work. But that means that this gray doesn't work anymore on that specific color. So I'm going to go to that. I'm going to make this lighter, I guess, like something like that. And that's pretty good, right? So you've got your frame here. The only thing that's missing is adding a UI text constraint. So whenever you see that the text is too big, add a UI text constraint, okay? Insert that in there, set that to 35, and there you go. And obviously you need to modify the text to, like something like redeem or something. So you're asking them to redeem the code they just entered. And just personal preference, just gonna put this slightly up, just like that, okay? Now I'm just going to add a text button on the side, just like this, so we can open and close this UI, okay? Set the size to 0.10, 0.10. Make sure the text button is parented underneath the screen UI and not the background frame. okay? Border size pixel to 0, text color to white, set the text scale property to true, text stroke transparency to 0.6 again, and set the background color tree to pick screen color and pick the same color right there. Insert a UI corner just like that. Again, we're doing the same thing we were doing. So scale 0.25. So you got that nice rounded corners. And then you have text size constraint and set that to 35. And final thing, set the font to Gotham Black. Just like this. Change the text to codes. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Just name this to codes or something. Or button or something, I don't know. And there you go. Click on the background frame and set that to visible false. And now we can actually start scripting. Okay, so click on the codes UI, insert a local script, okay? And I'm going to call this code handler, okay? Clear up the script and let's start coding. So local UI equals script.parent. Okay, so script.parent, that's the parent of the script. So this is the UI, okay? And local background is equal to UI dot background. Okay, so this is the UI, and we're searching for the background within that UI, and we're essentially storing this inside of this variable. Okay, if you don't know what I'm doing, check out my Zero to Hero series. I have tutorials on variables, local variables, and anything we're going to cover today. And local button is equal to background. UI dot button. So UI dot button, just like that, okay? And we're just storing that inside of this variable, okay? And now we just need to also store the submit button, okay? So local submit is equal to background dot submit, okay? So we are now in the background and we're attempting to access submit. So background dot submit, okay? And local text box is equal to background dot text box, and the text box is, you know, that thing that the user types in the code and, you know, submits the code from. That's pretty much what the text box is. It's where the user types. So we need to set a variable. So local visible is equal to false. So currently it's not visible. Okay, so let me show you guys how to actually do this. So button.mouse button one click connect function. Okay, pretty simple event. If you don't know what events are, check out my Zero to Hero series. I have a tutorial on that. So whenever someone clicks the button, okay, this button right here, we want to essentially toggle the visibility of the codes UI on and off. So if I click it and it's not visible, I want it to pop up. And if I click it and it's already visible, I want it to essentially disappear. Okay, so very easy way to do that. Background.visible. Okay, so it's a property called visible, and if I toggle it, it'll be visible and invisible. Okay, is equal to not background.visible, which means we don't even need that at all. Okay, so if I click play and wait for this to join or load up, that is, if I click this, it'll actually toggle just like that, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, now we need to make this button work. As you guys can see, I can type in anything in here, so test code or something, but that's the basics of making it visible and invisible, right? So we're just hooking up an event. Okay, so whenever someone clicks on it, we want to run this function, and a function is essentially just a set of code which runs whenever you want it to, and we want to set the visible property to the inverse. So if it's visible, we want it to set that. So if it's visible, we want it to be invisible, but if it's invisible, we want it to be visible. Okay, that's what this not is. It's essentially inverting. That's what it is. Okay, now let's go to replicated storage, insert a remote function, okay? And I'll explain what this does in a second, but call this submit code, okay? And in the same place, inside of replicated storage, insert a module script. And this is essentially going to be our codes list, okay? And just clear out the script and return an array, okay? If you don't know what arrays are or tables, I have a tutorial on that. Check out my Zero to Hero series. But essentially, we want to have this module script right here, okay, contain all of the codes that we want our game to have. So let me show you guys how this would work. So I want to have a code called subscribe. Okay, just like that. And essentially, we're just going to be creating a dictionary, okay? Actually, we don't even need a dictionary. Let me not overcomplicate this. Subscribe will give you, for example, 400 coins, okay? If we want another code, copy that, and we can call it CovertCode, okay? So the code is going to be CovertCode, and you're going to get 200 coins for submitting CovertCode as a code. Might be confusing, but essentially think of this as a box of information, and whenever you submit a code, we need to check if the code the player submitted is valid. So this is the place we would check for, you know, like this is our box, and these are the things that we're looking for within the box, okay? And I'm going to move this actually to server script service, okay? And basically, right, whenever someone clicks this, it'll show, you know, let me comment this. So whenever someone clicks, show or hide codes UI, right? But now we need to actually make the submit button work. Okay, so submit.mouse button one click connect function. Okay, function. There we go. So same thing, whenever someone clicks on the submit button, we want to run a function. Again, a function is just a set of code you want to run at any specific amount of time or period in time, right? But essentially, whenever someone clicks the submit button, we want to use this remote function, which we just inserted here. So game, the replicated storage, okay? So we're accessing the game, and we're going to replicate the storage. Then we need to access .submit code, okay? And invoke server, okay? And what we're doing here is telling the server, hey, I want to attempt to redeem a code, because you should never redeem codes on the client. I'm not going to go into depth about why you should not do that. So just remember that you should never trust the client. So local success or message, okay? And we're going to be storing the reply of this remote function. If you don't know what remote functions do, check out my tutorial on remote functions. But essentially, you submit. So essentially, you send a message to this remote function, okay? And this remote function sends a message to another script, and that script sends you a message back, okay? And the remote function essentially is your medium. Think of it as like a phone, and you're calling a script, and then the phone is giving you back the information which the other script gives you. Now, as a parameter, okay, we want to tell the script, hey, I attempted to redeem this code, but right now we're not giving it any information. Remember that phone analogy? You need to actually say something on the phone for the other person to hear you. And right now, we're not saying anything. So within these brackets, okay, we want to give it whatever I wrote down. So if I attempted to redeem CovertCode as a code, we want to give it that value, okay? So we just want to go to textbox.text, okay? And this property is what the user types in. Pretty simple, okay? Before we do this though, okay? Before we do this, textbox dot, I believe there's a property which stops you from modifying the text, which is, text editable, okay? So text editable is equal to false. So you stop the user from modifying the text. So you can essentially capture the text the user attempts to submit. And then at the end, you want to allow them to write again. Okay, so you're stopping them from editing the text, you're sending a message, and then you are allowing them to edit the text again. Simple stuff, okay? Now, here's something we could do. Textbox.text is equal to message, okay? So basically, if the user submits a correct code, you want to say, hey, you submitted a good code, it was redeemed. Or if they submit an incorrect code, we want to, essentially tell them that they submitted a wrong code. Okay, so that's what this does. So you remember that phone analogy? You are now telling something or saying something on the phone, and you're expecting a reply from the other person, which is the other script, which is, just a simple analogy. And the thing that the script says on the phone is going to be the message, right? And that's what we want to display to the user. So if the script says, hey, you attempted to enter an incorrect code, that's what we're going to show the user. Okay, and before we allow the user to edit the text again, we want to wait around, like 2 seconds, just so they can have some time to actually view the message, and then we want to clear whatever they entered. Okay, and essentially this is what's going to happen. Look at this. Right now, nothing's going to happen because we don't have anyone on the other end. We haven't essentially written the script to pick up the phone. Okay, so if I search up or type up ASD, I'm going to redeem. It's not going to allow me to modify the text, and it's going to reset the text. That's all it's doing right now. The magic actually happens when we create our first server script. So go to server script service, insert a script, okay, and call this codes handler or code controller or something. Just codes is okay. Okay, drag this module script inside of that script. Okay, clear up the script. And we want to access what's inside of this module script. And the way to do that is by requiring. So local codes list is equal to require script.codes list. Okay, so essentially we are asking the script to give us all of its contents, which is what we're doing. We're returning all of the contents. Okay, and we are storing all of the contents within this variable, right? So this variable now contains all of the codes in the game. Now, to actually have an effect for our codes, we need the players to actually have coins, right? So that's what this is going to be doing. We are going to be rewarding players coins. Okay, so what you would do to create coins, and I have a tutorial on this, how to make leader stats. But essentially, game.players.player added, connect function player, and this essentially waits for someone to join your game. So whenever a player joins your game, it'll run this function, okay? And then we want to give them stats. So local stats is equal instance, or let me just call this leader stats, instance.new, folder player, okay? And leader stats .name is going to be leader stats. And I'll show you what this does in a second, guys. And local coins equals instance.new, number value, leader stats, coins.name equals coins. And notice what this is going to do. So essentially in the top right hand corner, we are now going to have coins as part of our leaderboard, right? And the goal of this code system is if we enter a correct code, redeem it, it's going to give us coins, okay? And just something for later, okay? So local folder or codes folder is equal to instance.new folder player codes folder name is equal to codes. So this is just going to be a folder within the player, and everything that the player has redeemed code wise will be stored here, so that players can't redeem the same code twice. So let me comment this out. So give players coin stat. Okay, pretty simple. Now let's actually pick up the phone. Okay, so game.replicated storage.submitCode.onServerInvoke is equal to function player and code. Okay, so let me explain what we just did here. We located the remote function. Okay, and essentially onServerInvoke means whenever someone calls, pick up the phone. That's what this is doing. So whenever someone invokes that remote function, we want to run this function. So whenever someone calls the phone, pick up and run this piece of code. That's all we're doing. And player is the player who sent or called, and code is what they attempted to type in, right? So the first thing we need to do, right, is check if the code is valid. So if codes list code, then, so this means that code is valid, okay? And I'm just going to simplify this for you guys and just do is not equal to nil. So if we manage to find a an object within this module script, right? So if the code, for example, is subscribe, we are searching the codes list for subscribe. So this would be subscribe, right? And this exists. So if it finds it, it's going to return true, right? If it doesn't find it, it's going to return nil, right? And my bad, it won't return true. I'm just essentially, you need to know how dictionaries work. I have a tutorial on that, but essentially just know that if it finds nothing, then this won't continue, right? And by default, we want to return, incorrect code. Remember that we need to answer the phone when it does ring. So right now, if we click play, okay, it's always going to say invalid code. Okay, so we've got the coins, click on codes, enter test, and it's going to say incorrect code, and it's going to reset the text, just like that, okay? That's because we're not doing anything if we do find the code. So if we do find the code, return valid code, okay? And essentially, if we did find that code, we want to give the player coins. So remember this, I said returns true, it does not return true. So this piece of code, if the code that the player entered is not invalid, it will return the number of coins we want to give them. Because as you guys can see, there's an equality sign, and that's just how variables work. Okay, if you don't know how variables work, I also have a tutorial on that. So basically, remember we created a coins value within the player. Okay, so we are just going to do player.leaderstats coins.value plus equals that. Okay, so here's what we did. We are going to go to the player. Okay, we're going to access this leader stats value that we created when they joined. We're going to access the coins value, okay, which is inside of leader stats, and we're going to increment the value or add the value by the amount that we want to reward when the player redeems a code. So if I enter CovertCode as a code, we will be incrementing how much coins I have by 200. If I attempt to enter subscribe as a code, we are going to be incrementing the coins the player has by 400. Okay, and click play, and you'll see this in action. So click codes, enter subscribe, and we are going to get 400 coins. Okay. The only issue is if I enter subscribe twice, it will still give me that code. It will still redeem that code. And usually, you can only enter a code once, which is why we added this folder here. Okay, so let me show you the magic that we need to do. Essentially, before incrementing, okay, we want to check if the player already redeemed the code. And the way we're going to do that is if we manage to find the code within the player's code folder, then that means they already redeemed it. So if player.codes find first child code, then redeemed, okay? And we should do is equal to nil, okay? So if it doesn't manage to find the code within that folder, then that means code is unredeemed. Just like that, okay? So I'm going to drag this, paste it there, drag this, paste it there, okay? And here we are just going to replace this with already redeemed. Okay, so if the player enters a correct code, cool. If the player, basically if they enter a correct code, we're going to proceed. If they enter a code which they haven't redeemed yet, then we can give them the coins. But by default, we will return this. Okay, you'll see that in action in a second. Okay, and you might notice that if we do this, actually let's click play and show you guys. So if we play now and attempt to redeem the code twice, so subscribe, you'll see that it still won't do what we want it to do. So it'll allow us to redeem it twice. That is because we are not adding the code to this folder. So we're checking, right, if it exists in that folder, but we're never adding it when they redeem it. Observe, okay? So local code is equal to instance. Actually, let's not use that because we're already using that name. So local temp is equal to instance.new, right? Bool value, and we're going to parent that to player.codes, okay? And name that as code. Okay, watch this. Whenever someone redeems a code, we are inserting an object within their codes folder. Okay, so subscribe. Okay, oh, look at this here up here. Okay, redeem. We inserted something called subscribe. That basically means that we redeem that code. If I attempt to redeem that same code again, it won't let me. It'll say already redeemed. That's because it found subscribe within that codes folder, okay? And that's how we keep track of if they redeem the code or not. And that's the basis of how to make a code system. Now we just click play again, and enter subscribe and CovertCode. We will earn a total of 600 coins. So subscribe, okay, gives me 400. And if we enter CovertCode, it'll give us 600, okay? If we want to add more codes, pretty easy, copy this, okay? And let's just say we want to have Twitter as a code or something, and we wanted to give players 1,000 coins. That's essentially how you add a code, copy, paste, and add as many codes as you want. Just make sure that the code's name is different and unique from any other code name that you entered, okay? So you can have multiple Twitter codes. And that's essentially it. I mean, the next step would be to make the save. And I do have a tutorial on how to save data. So I suggest checking that out, but it's pretty easy to make the save, right? But this is the foundation of a code system within your game. If you guys like this tutorial and want to see more, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. And if you have any suggestions about what videos I should make next, do not hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time.